I stood at parade rest, my dress blues clinging to me under the Texas sun, the weight of every metal pressing harder than the heat. Before me lay two flag-draped coffins, my husband Carlos and my 8-year-old son Mateo. The honor guard saluted in perfect silence. But behind me, there were no parents, no brother, no blood family at all. Instead, on my phone, a fresh notification lit up. A photo of my mother and father poolside in Cancun, piña coladas raised, captioned, "Escaping dreary days. Life's too short for cheap flowers and sad faces." My blood froze. In that single snapshot, decades of neglect collapsed into one undeniable truth. My own family had chosen cocktails over coffins. To understand why that single photo cut deeper than the funeral itself, you have to know where I came from. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, in a house where loyalty ran one way toward my younger brother, Nico. He was the golden boy, the one my parents bragged about even when he failed his classes or stumbled through odd jobs. Me? I was the shadow. When I came home with straight A's, my mother shrugged. When I won a state track medal, my father said, "Don't get cocky, it's not like your Nico." The message was clear. No matter how hard I tried, I would never shine as bright in their eyes. One winter, pneumonia knocked me down. I remember the chill of the hospital room, machines beeping steadily. I waited for my parents to show, but only the nurse adjusted my blanket. Hours later, I overheard laughter my parents had taken Nico out for pizza instead. I was 12 years old when I realized, in their world, I was optional. Even my best friend, a shepherd mix named Ranger, wasn't safe. When Nico broke a vase, he blamed the dog. My parents didn't hesitate. They sent Ranger away that same night. I cried until dawn, the house colder than ever. So I made a vow. If my own blood couldn't see me, I would carve a place where respect wasn't optional. That vow led me to the Navy, to uniforms that fit like armor, to medals that no one could take away. I thought service would finally erase the ache of being unseen. But family wounds don't fade. They wait, silent, for the day they split open. By the time I turned 18, I knew there was only one door open wide enough to let me escape the cold halls of my childhood, the Navy. The first time I put on that uniform, it felt heavier than my own skin. But for the first time in my life, heavy meant honorable. I wasn't invisible anymore. A superior officer saluted me, not because of my last name, but because of what that name was stitched onto. A fresh set of blues, crisp and proud. Boot camp broke me down and rebuilt me brick by brick. While other recruits cried themselves to sleep, I found peace in the discipline. Push-ups didn't hurt half as much as years of parental indifference. The sting of salt water in my eyes couldn't compare to the sting of being overlooked. Every shout from a drill instructor echoed louder than my father's silence, and somehow, that felt like progress. At least here, I was worth shouting at. Over the years, I climbed the ranks. Long deployments in the Pacific. Nights spent on deck staring at a horizon that looked more endless than any dream I'd once had. I earned medals, commendations for leadership, citations for valor. Each ribbon on my chest told a story, but at every family gathering, those stories meant nothing. I'll never forget the day I came home after a grueling 14-month deployment. My body was leaner, my hair cropped close, and my shoulders carried both exhaustion and pride. I wore my dress uniform to Sunday dinner, foolishly hoping for a nod of approval. My father barely looked up from carving roast beef. "Don't wear that thing at the table," he muttered. My mother poured wine and added, "You know uniforms make Nico uncomfortable." Nico himself smirked, spinning his car keys like he'd just closed $1 million deal, though, in reality, he'd quit his third job that year. That was the rhythm of my 20s and 30s. Sacrifice, service, and silence. My parents' living room glowed warm for Nico, while for me it was always drafty, cold. Then came Carlos. He wasn't military, though he respected it more than anyone in my bloodline ever had. We met at a charity 5 Kelvins, where he teased me for running like I was still in formation. His laughter was gentle, the kind that softened the sharp edges I'd carried since childhood. He worked as a mechanical engineer, steady, grounded. If my life was a stormy ocean, Carlos was the anchor. 2 years later, we married in a modest ceremony. My parents declined the invitation. They said they were too busy helping Nico settle into his new venture, which ended 6 months later in bankruptcy. I didn't care. My brothers in arms stood in the pews, their salutes at the altar meaning more than any blessing from the people who had given me life. When Mateo was born, I swore my son would never wonder where his mother stood. I was there for the late nights, the scraped knees, the baseball games. Even when deployments pulled me away, I sent videos, letters, drawings, folded into envelopes. I wanted him to feel, in every fiber, that he was seen, cherished, irreplaceable. Carlos was the same. He built Mateo a treehouse with his own calloused hands, staying up until midnight, hammering beams by lantern light. He carried our boy on his shoulders at parades, cheering loudest when Navy jets streaked across the sky. For the first time, family didn't feel like a word sharpened against me. It felt like a fortress built around me. Still, my parents' shadows lingered. They'd occasionally call, mostly to brag about Nico's half-baked ventures. A car wash that folded in 3 months, a crypto business that drained their savings. Each time, the conversation turned sour when they slipped in a jab. You know, Nico would have been a colonel by now if he'd joined up. Or, don't get too comfortable. Medals don't pay the bills. I stopped calling back. Yet, some part of me still wished they'd come around, maybe at Mateo's birthday, maybe at Christmas. But birthdays came and went. Christmas lights glowed without their faces at our door. I told myself it didn't matter. I had Carlos, I had Mateo, I had my chosen family in uniform. But late at night, staring at the medals lined up on my dresser, I felt the old ache. Those medals were proof, yes, but proof means little if no one cares to look. Then, in the fall of last year, orders came down. My service record was impeccable. My retirement papers ready. 20 years, countless deployments, a chest full of ribbons. I turned them in and walked out with honor. For once, I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would see me not as the forgotten child, but as the veteran who had done her duty. But they never called, not even a text. Instead, I found myself pouring my discipline into civilian life, setting up a small security consultancy. Carlos cheered me on. Mateo drew crayon badges and taped them to my office wall. We were building something strong, something that might last generations. I thought the hardest battles of my life were behind me. I was wrong. Because the day I lost Carlos and Mateo, all those buried wounds split wide open, and my parents, the very people who should have carried me through the darkest storm, chose margaritas over mourning. The accident happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that should have been forgettable. Carlos had picked up Mateo from baseball practice, their laughter echoing in the car as the sun dipped behind the desert hills. But one wrong turn, one truck drifting across the lane, and my world ended in the screech of metal. I was in uniform when the officer came to my door. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he held his cap. I didn't need words, the silence said enough. 2 coffins, one too small, draped in flags that felt heavier than my whole career. The funeral was held with full honors. Sailors in dress whites, rifles fired in a salute that cracked across the cemetery like a verdict. My knees wanted to buckle, but I stood rigid, a captain to the end. Carlos had given me laughter. Mateo had given me purpose, and now both lay beneath folded flags. I scanned the crowd, foolishly, hoping against hope. No familiar faces, no parents, no brother. Just the absence that had defined my life, now screaming louder than the rifles. And then the phone buzzed. A notification lit up. A photo of my parents poolside in Cancun, sunglasses tilted, cocktails raised. The caption read, "Escaping dreary days, life's too short for cheap flowers and sad faces." My blood went cold. They hadn't just skipped the funeral, they mocked it. For 2 weeks, I tried to breathe through the silence. I buried myself in logistics, paperwork, survivor's benefits. At night, the house echoed with absence. Mateo's baseball glove sat on the table, Carlos's boots by the door. I told myself I was strong enough to carry this alone. Then, they came knocking. I opened the door to see my parents standing there, Nico lounging behind them like he owned the place. My mother smiled as if nothing had happened. "Mariana, darling, we're here to talk business." Business. They sat at my kitchen table, sipping the coffee I shouldn't have offered. My father cleared his throat. "We need $50,000. Nico's finally found his path, a bar downtown. With your pension, your insurance money, it shouldn't be hard." I stared, unblinking. "You skipped your grandson's funeral. You skipped your son-in-law's. And you're here for money?" My mother leaned forward, her voice syrupy. "Honey, God works in mysterious ways. Maybe he freed you from those ties so you could support your real family now." Real family. The rage was quiet, sharp. "Get out," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Years of command sat behind it. "Out of my house. Now." Nico smirked on his way out. "You'll come around. You always do." But I didn't. That door closed, and with it, the last thread tying me to blood. Days later, a knock again, but this time, it was different. It was my Uncle Raphael, my father's younger brother. A Marine veteran with a limp from Fallujah, Raphael was the only blood relative who had shown up at the funeral. He stood on my porch holding a casserole dish, but his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 deployments. We sat in silence at first, eating bites neither of us tasted. Finally, he spoke. "I know what they did, and I know what they'll keep doing if you let them." I swallowed hard. "They want me to bankroll Nico. They mocked my son's funeral." Raphael nodded. "Blood doesn't make family. Actions do. You've worn the uniform, you know the truth. But if you want peace, you'll have to confront them. Not in anger, with proof. With discipline. That's how you win wars." His words sank into me like orders I'd been waiting for all my life. That night, I opened a fresh notebook. On the cover, I wrote one word in block letters. Operation Truth. Step 1. Build strength. I officially left the Navy, channeling my discipline into Cruise Shield Security, a private firm staffed with veterans who needed a new mission. We trained in parking lots, drafted protocols, took contracts nobody else wanted. My company became a fortress not just for clients, but for me. Step 2. Gather intelligence. I started pulling every document, every receipt. Nico's unpaid debts stacked higher than his promises. Creditors' letters, eviction notices, failed LLC filings, it was all there. Then came the photos. My parents' poolside in Cancun, the timestamp matching the day of Carlos and Mateo's funeral. Screenshots of the cruel messages. Every artifact was ammunition. Step 3. Choose the battlefield. Family gatherings had always been arenas of humiliation for me. This time, I would flip the script. A reunion at a well-known steakhouse was coming up. A chance for my parents to strut, and for Nico to charm distant cousins. That would be my battleground. Step 4. Prepare allies. Raphael promised to stand beside me, cane in hand, his marine ribbons gleaming. "They've erased you for years," he said. "This time, they'll face the truth in front of everyone." Step 5. Maintain silence. I didn't vent. I didn't scream. I trained. I documented. I planned. Silence became my weapon. Dignity, my shield. If my parents had built their empire of lies on noise, I would dismantle it with the quiet weight of evidence. As the reunion drew closer, I could feel the fire building, not the wild blaze of grief, but a controlled combustion. My pain had been weaponized. My rage had turned into strategy. They had chosen margaritas over mourning. At the reunion, they would have no choice but to drink down the bitter truth. The steakhouse was crowded, the air thick with the scent of seared beef and the chatter of relatives who hadn't seen each other in years. Waiters wove between tables carrying trays of sizzling plates, glasses clinking like distant alarms. I walked in wearing my dress uniform. The ribbons across my chest caught the dim light, each one a story of sacrifice that my parents had dismissed as decoration. The room hushed not all the way, but enough. Heads turned. Forks paused mid-air. My presence, so often ignored at home, could not be unseen here. At the far end, my parents sat proudly, Nico beside them, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. They froze when they saw me. My father's lips tightened. My mother's smile faltered. Nico smirked, as if daring me to make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm. I simply walked to the front, Raphael steadying himself behind me with his cane. I tapped a glass once. The room fell silent. "Before we eat," I said, "I need to share something. Not for me, though. God knows I deserve it. For Carlos. For Mateo." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I opened the folder I carried, its edges sharp with evidence. I laid out the first page on the table nearest me. An eviction notice bearing Nico's name. Gasps. Whispers. "While my parents told you Nico was thriving, he was drowning in debt," I said. Page after page followed bankruptcy filings, bounced checks, failed business registrations. The pile grew taller, the silence heavier. Nico laughed nervously. "Documents can be forged." I cut him off by projecting the next slide onto the wall behind me. A photograph. My parents' poolside in Cancun, cocktails raised. The timestamp glowed in the corner. The same day, Carlos and Mateo were lowered into the ground. A collective intake of breath sucked the air from the room. Someone muttered, "Dear God." And while I stood alone at two coffins, I continued, voice steady, "This is what my family chose." My mother's eyes darted, searching for escape. My father clenched his jaw. Nico shifted uncomfortably. I brought up the final piece, a screenshot of the message. "Escaping dreary days. Life's too short for cheap flowers and sad faces." The words glowed like fire across the screen. The silence was absolute. Even the kitchen noise seemed to have died. Raphael's voice broke it. Gravelly, commanding, every inch the Marine he once was. "I was there that day," he said, pointing his cane at the projection. "I saw Mariana stand by those coffins alone. I saw the folded flags handed to her, and I saw the empty seats where her parents should have been. Don't let them lie to you anymore." The weight of his testimony fell like a gavel. Heads shook. Relatives whispered in disbelief, disgust. Some turned away from my parents entirely. My father slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. This is a family matter." "No," I interrupted, my voice calm but final. "Family matters are decided by family, and family shows up. You didn't." For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of exposure. The authority he had wielded through silence shattered under the louder silence of the crowd's judgment. My mother stood, trembling. "You don't understand. Cancun was booked months before." "No excuse erases the absence," I said. "No vacation undoes a skipped farewell. No cocktail cancels out a coffin." Nico tried again, desperation creeping into his smirk. "Come on, cousin," he said to one of the relatives. "You know Mariana's always been dramatic." But no one laughed. Chairs shifted away from him. One by one, eyes turned cold. I closed the folder. The operation complete. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I came for truth. You've ignored me for decades, but tonight you will not erase Carlos. You will not erase Mateo. The silence after those words was heavier than applause. It was judgment. It was justice. My parents rose abruptly, chairs scraping like accusations. Nico followed, face red, muttering curses under his breath. They left in a hurry, the door slamming behind them. No one stopped them. No one waved goodbye. For the first time, I stood in a room full of relatives and felt the warmth I'd been denied all my life, not because of blood, but because the truth had burned through the lies. Raphael squeezed my shoulder. You did what soldiers do, he whispered. You held the line. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Nico's number lit the screen. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. His voice was shaky. Look, sis, maybe we went too far. Maybe we need your help now. Can't you just forgive and forget? I let the silence stretch, the power of it greater than any words. Finally, I answered. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, and you never did. I hung up. For once, the line stayed dead, and I felt alive. The night after the confrontation, I sat at my desk staring at a blank sheet of paper. For years, I had begged my parents with my achievements, my medals, my loyalty, hoping they'd finally see me. Now I saw the truth. They never would. I picked up my pen and began to write a letter. Not for them, for me. Mother, Father, Nico, I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I refuse to let your neglect rot the rest of my life. You chose absence. I choose presence. You chose lies. I choose truth. You chose cocktails. I choose coffins, honor, and the memory of those worth remembering. I signed it, folded it, and placed it in a drawer I never opened again. Forgiveness wasn't for reconciliation. It was for release. The next morning, I put on my uniform one last time and drove to the cemetery. The grass was damp with dew, the flags on the graves fluttering in the morning wind. I knelt between the stones, tracing Carlos's name with one hand, Mateo's with the other. I did it, I whispered. They can't erase you. Not anymore. The sun broke through the clouds, warming my back. For the first time since the accident, I felt something more than grief. I felt purpose. 2 years passed, and that purpose became flesh. Crew's Shield security grew strong, staffed with veterans who needed a second mission. We landed contracts that no one thought possible, and with every success, I hired another brother or sister in arms. My company became more than a business. It became a family, forged not by blood, but by honor. With part of the profits, I founded Mateo's Light Fund, a foundation for children of fallen service members. We provided scholarships, therapy, and community. Each smile, each handshake, each hug was a thread in a tapestry of legacy that Carlos and Mateo left behind. At the ribbon cutting of our new office, Raphael stood beside me, his marine ribbons gleaming, tears in his eyes. You turned pain into purpose, he said. That's the highest rank there is. As for my parents and Nico, they drifted further into the past. Their absence no longer hurt, it simply confirmed what I already knew. Family is not blood. Family is who shows up. And that's where I leave you, watching this now. Because maybe you've carried the same wounds. Maybe your own family has made you feel invisible, disposable, replaceable. Maybe you've buried your loyalty in graves no one else bothered to visit. If you have, then this story is yours as much as mine. Stand tall in your silence. Wear your scars like medals. Build families out of loyalty, not DNA. Because in the end, the ones who matter aren't the ones who share your blood. They're the ones who stand beside your coffin, or your battle, or your darkest day, and refuse to leave. If you've ever had to choose honor over convenience, truth over comfort, or chosen family over toxic bloodlines, then you already know what I know. This story was for you. And if you're still here, it means you were meant to be. Subscribe, share your story in the comments, and remember, family isn't who you're born to. Family is who shows up.